My name is Kevin Teasley, and welcome to our Neve 8424 tutorial series. I'm very fortunate and excited to be able to do this tutorial series for you and to be partnered with AMS Neve. I have behind me the Neve 8424, and I'm very excited to show you how I use the console in a variety of settings, from mixing, recording, sound design, post-audio mixes, mastering, for a wide variety of projects, from live performances to TV shows to feature films and even some other cool little projects. I have the Neve 8424 and the Neve 8816 along with other fabulous AMS Neve products. So we're going to show you how we use the console in all these settings with A-list artists, clients, TV networks, and feature film studios. So stay tuned. And in this first episode, we're just going to go over how I have the console set up in my studio, my basic workflow, my basic patching, how I have things laid out on the console. So in future episodes, you kind of have understanding of what I'm talking about and how I have it laid out. So please enjoy, sit back and relax, and hope you learned something. Thank you for staying tuned and watching our Neve 8424 tutorial series. And in this first tutorial series, I just want to go over how I have the console set up in my workflow. In the subsequent videos, we're going to be talking about several projects that I've worked on with it. And I think the more you're familiar with how I have it set up, it'll give you more insight of how you can use it in your workflow, and it'll make more sense of how I'm using it in my projects. I want to make these very non-scripted and very just conversational, stream of thought, and just kind of go through it and talk about how I use it and how I have it set up. So this is my Neve 8424, and we're here in my studio at Studio K. And I just first want to walk through how I have things set up. On input A, 1 through 24, I have my DAW sends, outputs 1 through 24 going to the console. On input B, all the way from 25, I believe, until 40 or 41, I have all of my keyboards, all of my hardware synths, all of my drum machines and things like that. Except for the last two inputs on input B, I have a Neve 8816 summing mixer patched in. And I use that a lot to send string orchestra stems, BGV stacks, a lot of times electronic drums or even live drums, to kind of sum things there and send it back to the console and process it more when it gets to the console. So 1 through 24 on my input A is from the DAW. Input B all the way up until the last 23, 24 is keyboards and synths, with 23 and 24 being my Neve 8816. And on input C, the way I have that set up is the first 1 through 8 inputs on input C is my Dangerous Convert 8 outputs. And I use that a lot for either mastering, or if there's stems being sent to me, I run them out through that, process it on the console, and print it back in. On the second 8, I use a lot for either a guest, if a producer is in the studio. I have 8, have a loom sending out to them so they can patch in their audio interface. We can bring it into the console and do some processing to it, along with keyboards or other tracks that I have going into it, so that their audio is coming in as well. If I'm not using it for a guest producer audio interface, I have a lot of stomp boxes and other hardware gear that kind of goes through there. And on the last bank of 8 are some hardware sends, mainly to effects. The first one is going to a Roland Space Echo RA301. The second is going to a Echoplex EP4. The first pair is going to a Lexicon PCM92. The third pair is going to a TC Reverb 4000. And then the last pair is going to a TC 1210 Chorus Spatial Expander hardware unit. So that allows me to send out of the DAW, whether it's Pro Tools or Logic, whatever you're using, out of my hardware outputs to the hardware reverbs back up onto the console. On my reverb returns, on reverb return 1 and 2, I have a Bricasti M7 sending stereo information. And then on auxiliary send or reverb return 1, I have the Eventide Eclipse. Mostly I'm sending vocals or any mono material to that, and it's coming back in stereo. So 1 and 2, auxiliary 1 and 2 are my Bricasti sends, and auxiliary 3 are my Eventide sends. So that's how I have that set up. I usually send all of my vocals when I do have a mix to groups 3 and 4, my lead vocals, that is. And I'm routing all the hardware reverb returns and signal processing to go to 3 and 4 of my groups. And we'll go through that in later videos. And then in 1 and 2, a lot of times I'm having drums and or I make that my version of a rear bus. And we can go over that later as well. So that's basically how I have it set up. I have my console hardwired to my interface because I want to make sure I'm doing less patching and I can just move quickly. That we can also get to in later episodes, that I have in my Neve recall app, a mix recall that I can recall on the console, an edit recall, a vocal tracking session recall, an instrumental tracking, sound design, post mix, overdub. I have tons of different templates recalled on the console that I already have things routed in and ready to go. And later I'm going to be really excited to let you guys know about when I have installed the automated flying faders, where one layer is your fader automation for your actual console, and then you flip, and then there's another layer that actually the faders control the DAW. So that's really how I have it set up. Just to recap, 1 through 24 are coming from my audio interface on my input A. Input B all the way down to 23 and 24 are all my hardware synths and keyboards. 23 and 24 on input B are my Neve 8816. That gives me another 16 channels that I sum and bring into the console. And as you know, you can have inserts on that and send it up there if need be, if that was on my input C, and we can go through that later. And then on input C is the first bank of 8 is my Dangerous Convert 8. The second bank of 8 is guest producer audio interface, up to 8 channels. When they're not here, I have tons of stomp boxes and pedals and specialty effects that I patch in there. And then I have my hardware vintage gear, Roland Space Echo, EP4, Lexicon PCM92, TC Reverb 4000, and then a TC 1210 spatial expander. We can also go through my outboard gear when we get to some of the mix projects of what I'm inserting on each channel. My auxiliary sends 1 and 2 are my Bricasti M7 reverb, coming back on reverb return 1. And then auxiliary 3, a mono send is going to my Eventide Eclipse, coming back stereo. And then we talked about how different ways I have things routed. My group 3 and 4 are usually on my lead vocals, so that I can send lead vocals, any parallel compression and other parallel techniques, reverb, delays, all of that, and send it here. So that way my balances remain the same, and I can control it here. This is going to be even more interesting once we get the flying faders in, because you'll be able to automate that. My hardware effects, I usually relegate to my lead vocal most of the time, if it's a vocal track, and they all come down to group 3 and 4. In group 1 and 2 are usually all of my drums and percussion and 808s or basses. And if not, if the track doesn't call for it, I'll send make it my rear bus, and we can talk about in later episodes about how you assign the tracks to the faders and the tracks to go to this, and then you can have that as a rear bus and what you send to it. It's a very flexible console. It's so many things you can do, and I also have it routed so that the direct outs 1 through 24 are going right back into my DAW. So if I'm doing a post mix, or preparing stems, I mix stems from a producer to send back to them for another mix if I'm doing like a pre-mix, or if I am mixing stems for a live show, I can send everything out to the console and then print that back in all in one pass from the console. A lot of times on my, I forgot to mention that I have on my auxiliary input coming in, I can also have my print rig coming back in. So I print on a separate rig that I'm mixing on. So I'll go out of my mix out into my print rig and able to monitor that back in on my external input, which is very, very handy. On my master fader / mix out, sometimes I'll put various bus compressors or EQs and limiters on that if I'm printing back in, if I don't need to print stems back in for later use. And we can talk about strategies for that in later episodes of how I do that. When mixing the picture, I use a program called Video Slave 4, and that's running on a different computer so that I don't have a lot of, I'm not taxing the mix computer too hard with a high-res picture. So the picture is on another rig, and it's the mix rig is sending MIDI time code out to that, and it's chasing to that. So if they're sending me reference dialogue and sound effects and things like that, I'll route that into my mix bus inject, which we can go into later. So that way I'm hearing their dialogue and sound effects that might be comped as a 2-track. And as I'm mixing, when I'm printing back in, if I need to send them a reference, the audio that's baked into the video goes through the transformers on the mix out as well, with all the other processing and everything like that on it. Quick just side note, as we know from the videos, when you want to go into 48 channel mix mode, that's how you enable the input C's up here. So that really keeps things moving quickly. Again, and so if you have any questions, please hit us up in the comment field. If I missed anything, we'll try to recap it on some other videos going forward so that you can just remember how I have things routed. So when we go through the projects that we've done, that'll all make sense to you. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.